Welcome to the Juice Consumer Direct podcast, where we're attempting to answer some of the questions that our clients and vendors often ask us. Why do they ask us these questions? Well, we're widely considered to be the experts when it comes to consumer direct marketing. So let's get into it. Let's introduce who we've got here with us today and go into some of the details of what makes us the experts and go over some finer points of what makes consumer direct marketing successful. Over here, we have Carson Poppenger. So Carson, why don't you introduce yourself?
Carson Poppenger, founder, CEO at Squeeze. And we've been in business now since 2009. We started at the sort of during the last the Great Recession. And whole focus for our business is on helping companies increase their ROI and return on ad spend on the leads that they generate. And it's been our focus for the last 15 years in many different verticals. And so happy to be here and just discuss some of the things that are going on right now and give some of our insights and maybe ask some questions and things like that and get some discussion around this. So glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And Carson's been doing this for 20 years. Not trying to age you or anything like that, but you got a lot of experience. So there's a lot to offer. We also have Jacob Thorpe. So Jacob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jacob Thorpe. I am the VP of Clients and Partnerships at Squeeze, and I've been here for about 10 years. During that time, I've seen Squeeze go from a pretty nascent new organization to a really mature, exciting, growing, thriving company. And as you know, I've taken part of that. I've learned a lot and had my hands on a lot of different things. It's been super exciting. Outside of work, I love golf. I love basketball, sports, fantasy football.
That's going to be that'll be a future episode. Is fantasy football?
Could be
for sure. And I'll say that one of the things that surprised me in a positive way when I first came to Squeeze, which was about a year ago. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here, Nate Clegg, and I've been doing lead generation and direct-to-consumer marketing for a while too, 17 years, which ages me too, makes me feel old. But was the clients, the type of clients that we're bringing in, they're enterprise level financial institutions or insurance groups or home service companies, and they're really high caliber clients. And I think that speaks to the expertise that we've experienced along the way. And when you're creating sales opportunities for big companies like that, you really have to have things buttoned up. And so that's what we've been able to do. We're really good at doing outreach to leads that are generated internally by our clients, leads that they're buying, or really even portfolio work, or they're reaching out to their existing consumer base. So that's been really, really good. Now, one of the questions I have, and when I first met with Carson and talked to him, was the name Squeeze. Where did it come from, and who came up with it?
Yeah, so before I started Squeeze, I worked in education for a company that had 500 sales people, and we would consume 10,000 leads every week. So every week they're buying 10,000 leads that were being distributed out to the sales team. And what we realized and found was that the sales team couldn't get through and create meaningful conversations with so many of those leads that were purchased. And the companies are spending millions of dollars a month potentially on this lead volume, and to have leads come in and not be contacted, not be converted into sales opportunities, I just kind of recognized that this was a pain point for a lot of companies, and that's kind of why we started Squeeze. And so since then, we moved into financial services businesses and mortgage and insurance and home services, home security, everything from bath remodel to walk-in tubs and things like that as well. So just a lot of businesses that have large sales teams and consume a lot of lead data. That's kind of what we realized we could help provide a solution for those companies. So
yeah, for sure. You'd be surprised at which companies out there have a lot of lead data. And that's usually the people we can help the most. That's who we're targeting and that's who we're talking to. And we have, like Carson said, we have home services, we have above ground pools that we're talking to. And then, a couple of seats over, we could be talking to somebody about mortgage. So it's all over the place, but it really comes down to who's interacting with a lot of consumers. One thing that was interesting that you said, Carson, is you talked about how your salespeople couldn't really get to everybody. And if you think about a traditional sales funnel, there's going to be breakage all the way around it. So one of the things, Jacob, that you're really good at is identifying the sales funnel, looking at it, analyzing it, and see where things drop out. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this sort of thing, like everyone kind of wants a silver bullet, right? And And to me, I think the real silver bullet is having systems and processes that give you insight into each step of the sales funnel, right? To your point, the different products and services that we work in all might have a different sales process, right? One might take 3 months to close. Another one might be a same day. If we can get a lead over to a loan officer or a debt consultant, they can close that and get them signed up that day, right? Some of them, the leads might be a lot more expensive on the front end or a little bit cheaper, right? But the truth is there are principles for each of those different industries that are consistent across the board. And that's where are these leads coming from?
Yeah.
And what are the steps that they need to go through to matriculate into a sale, right? Yeah. And really my objective and my main goal is to come to the table with these companies that you're talking about and say, hey, tell me a little bit about this, right? Like what's going on with these leads? Where are they coming from? What are you hoping that their brand experience is, right? How do we make sure that every touch that they have along this marketing funnel creates a level of brand loyalty and a strong sales experience that will make them conducive to close at the end of that whole process, right? I'm really surprised by the lack of systems that some companies will have, right? Some people just think it's leads and sale.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things in between.
There's so much that happens in the middle there. And a lot of it is systems and processes, and a lot of it is people and soft and more qualitative than quantitative, right? But having a full scope understanding of what's happening is essential to being able to diagnose like the different issues and then also recommend changes, adjustments, kind of strategic adjustments that will allow you to optimize and get the most out of that ad spend, which is what you're referring to.
One thing that I really liked about what you said, and we've talked about this a lot as we interact with new and potential clients, is kind of that white glove approach. A lot of times you look at marketing that's done where you do a lot of outreach directly to the consumer, and it's kind of like this negative aspect to it. But when you do it right, when you're representing the brand properly, when you're doing the outreach responsibly, it actually is a value add. It's not, it doesn't take away from the experience. And so we try to create that same sort of feel always here at Squeeze of this white glove approach because we want to protect the brand long term, and it always lends to conversion on the back end and the client sticking around longer as well. So I think that's really important when you look at your lead generation strategy and when you're doing your direct consumer outreach as well. So let's talk a little bit about leads.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick? No,
Absolutely.
a couple of months ago I was on a panel at LeadsCon, and the goal of that panel was to instruct and educate people on creating like brand loyalty through that customer journey, right? And I shared a story. We had someone who came on, wanted to be a partner of ours, right? And they came to me and they said, "Hey, this is the contact strategy that I'm going to recommend." As part of our company, we have a contact center that's a piece of what we do. In that contact center, they may have calls, texts, emails, as part of that outreach, right? And so this partner or this prospective partner came to us and said, "Hey, this is what I found works best. I want you to call them 60 times in the first 7 days.
Yeah,
I want you to call them 3 times in a row when you get the lead so that they think that it's an emergency. And then when you get them on the phone, teach your reps to de-escalate them and tell them that it is an emergency because they need a walk-in tub in their home." And I was like,
it's not good.
No, that's not good. And what's the experience of that customer's having, right? Like, independent of any compliance or legal concerns that you may have, like, what is the customer experience that person is having? And that's really, really important to recognize that there's ways to be efficient without
without alienating the consumer, right?
and exactly, and compromising your company values,
Creating bad will, distrust from the consumers. That's a really big thing right now, is just making sure that you build trust and don't jeopardize that by, some of these strategies that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always our point to try to understand that where's the lead coming from? What was their journey like before they got to us? And then once we're outreaching to them, whether it's outbound call, SMS, is that messaging and process in line with kind of like their experience up to that point. So that's the treatment that we apply to it may be different for everybody based on a lot of the strategies. We are similar depending on the vertical, no matter the vertical, but the treatment may be a little bit different based on how the lead was generated and what sources and things like that.
But understanding those metrics, like you were talking about, means you've got something that's sustainable and scalable, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be so much more cost effective too with what your agents are doing and with what your team is doing. You can focus on the most valuable targets rather than, kind of a scattershot approach, hoping for the best.
Yeah, for sure. And it's easy to see when we bring in a new client or look at an existing client when they really got it dialed in.
Yeah.
And frankly, the people that we can help the best are the ones who already kind of have it dialed in, and we just help them tweak it here and there and get it to where it needs to be and just get more out of those leads and get more calls generated. And one of the beautiful things about being at Squeeze is we get to see so many different clients, so many different verticals that we just have learned a lot. Each vertical and each client teaches us a new thing. And because as we learn, we can increase our expertise. We can apply those to new campaigns and to existing campaigns, and for sure slowly get better over time. And when you do that over 15 years, you end up having a really, really solid experience with them, right?
When I started at Squeeze 10 years ago, it was probably 8 years ago, I came on as kind of an account manager. And honestly, at that point, Carson bootstrapped this whole thing.
Yeah.
So this guy was there, from open to close every day. And he's like, hey, I need someone to help me manage these accounts. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I remember I was going to school for entrepreneurship, and I was hopping on these calls, these strategic calls with like chief marketing officers of like very reputable financial institutions, trying to hold my own space and trying to give them confidence in what Squeeze was doing, and just feeling like pretty humbled and wildly aware of probably my shortcomings. And now when I look back, I'm so grateful that I was able to just be kind of thrown in the fire, because I think about all of the people that I've been able to sit with and counsel with and learn from and learn with. And I think that's one of the greatest things about working with Squeeze is we see how it's happening.
Yeah.
And we see how industry leaders approach these things and think about these things. And we're able to adopt a lot of that mindset and a lot of that strategic thinking that we can then, implement and work with our clients to do.
Yeah, for sure. Carson, I have a question for you.
Sure.
As you've seen all these different clients come and grow their businesses with us, when you look at what they're doing well, what seems to be like the common trait or some common denominators for clients that just seem to really have their process dialed in?
That's a good question. I mean, I think when we're working with clients, I think one thing that I was going to add to that last comment,
Sure,
and I'll just kind of segue into this
Yeah.
is that I think things are always changing. Things are always evolving in this industry because there's new technologies, there's new approaches, there's new customer attitudes and things like that. And so it's important to always be open to ideas and learnings. And I think that's one of the things that makes a really good, successful client relationship is clients that we've worked with and met with who, they're always sort of like asking questions rather than trying to, just apply something
Prescribe
something a certain way, sort of like it's open for discussion. There's no sacred cows. There's no, everything's on the table. And is this the right approach? Is that the right approach? And making sure that just whichever direction you go, is strategic and not just sort of happenstance or throwing spaghetti at the wall. That's something that like I'm not a big fan of. Is like if you know what you're doing, if you've been doing this for a long time, you shouldn't have to throw spaghetti at the wall. To see what sticks. That's what they say. That's a terrible strategy because you're just basically then you're just like taking a shot in the dark. And if you've got the right amount of experience and know what you're doing, you shouldn't have to do wild guesswork like that.
Nate, does that spaghetti metaphor resonate with you as our resident foodie?
I am a resident foodie. As you can maybe tell, we got these tables high up, chest level, so you can hide my gut a little bit. But yeah, I love food very much. And I lived in Italy for 5 years. So yeah,
that's what I was gonna say.
Spaghetti very much speaks to me. And I think you're right, Carson, and kind of allude back to what we said earlier, that our clients that we can help the most are the ones who kind of have it dialed in already. They've realized, okay, here's my media buy when it comes to leads particularly. I'm going to generate as many as I can in-house because those tend to be better quality. I'm going to buy a certain amount of them as well. And then between those two things, they have enough lead volume for it to make sense. And Jacob, what have you seen when it comes to lead volume versus lead quality and the balance that needs to exist between those two and creating like a consistent, meaningful lead funnel?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One thing I wanted to comment just on piggybacking off of what Carson said.
Yeah.
I think something that people might not realize or might not measure is the activity of their salespeople.
Yep.
Right. If you're in sales, generally, if we're going to paint our stereotypical sales person, there's a little bit of ego there, right? Like they want to make money.
Yeah.
And they want to close deals. Like if you're in sales, you're a closer, right? And as someone who's been in sales, like I want to close deals, right? You want to make money.
Yeah.
And something that a lot of companies, big companies, struggle with is getting those salespeople who just want to close deals. Like I'm a salesperson, that's what I do, to prospect, right? You'll see these companies where they have leads that they've assigned to their salespeople, right? And at that point, that lead, that prospect is that salesperson's property. And it will sit in their queue for 6 months.
Always.
And nothing will happen because we had a partner who we brought on last week. They said one of their loan officers had 2,000 leads assigned to their name. I'm like,
it's a lot of leads.
There's a lot of money in there,
person.
right? We have another partner who every 3 weeks, they will wipe their loan officers' queues and take those leads and give them to us. And it's like their highest converting lead source. They close those at an extremely high rate, as high as their online digital forms, right? So I think that being able to measure your salesperson's activity and recognizing their strengths and recognizing maybe where there's some shortfalls or some pitfalls, some activity issues, that allows you to really optimize for those things that you're referring to. But you mentioned, did you want to say something, Carson?
Yeah. I was just going to add to that. I think, going back to your point about salespeople wanting to close sales and close deals, their highest and best use is being on the phone with a customer.
Generate revenue.
Sure. Yeah, generating revenue, pitching, having a presentation to the right person, the right group, rather than doing some activity that leads up to. I think a lot of times, maybe one of the mistakes that C-suites make in the industry is they may think, the salespeople will always spend all their time prospecting, or when they're not busy, they'll jump on the phone and prospect and do those things. But it's really sort of a different skill set.
Yeah.
Their best time and best use of their time is going to be talking to the consumer and having a presentation versus all these activities that, are sort of higher volume and lower quality and conversation.
And lower revenue generating.
Revenue generating, yeah. And so that's what we do is we just, help serve those up so that they can have those conversations.
And when you think about it, if you have a loan officer and let's say they're dialing their leads for a day, right? They might make 80 dials and talk to 10 people. And of those 10 people, they might talk to 5 people. Mm-hmm. If they were just to take inbound calls,
totally different
on average,
story.
they're going to take 10 to 12 sales, qualified leads that they can then pitch, right? Where, intent has been vetted, they've been pre-qualified, and they've got a sales pitch now.
And our clients, they typically have a much more expensive person sitting there trying to make those sales, right? You have a loan officer or a banker, or you might have somebody who's a qualified sales agent of some kind, and their cost per hour is significantly more than the average person. And so you've got to keep them busy.
And their desired income is as well, right? They want to make more money.
And then all of a sudden your revenue per hour skyrockets when you have somebody else. Basically, as you said, Carson, I thought the same thing, honestly, when you were talking. So it's just like you have to tee up these opportunities for them. Your revenue per hour is going to go through the roof. And a lot of times these executives, as Carson alluded to, like they have this mindset of, I've got to make this work. I got to make sure my salespeople are prospecting. They got to do their part. Really, in the end, you just need to generate revenue. Your revenue per hour needs to increase. So this is what you do.
Econ 110, right?
Efficiency.
Specialize. There's efficiency and specialization.
Absolutely. And we've seen that over and over again with us internally. It's so surprising to see these campaigns where we did analysis basically with our clients, and we looked at it. For every dollar they spend with us, they get $12 in return because we've specialized and we get to it. Now, we didn't answer exactly the question on volume versus the quality of the lead. What do you think? Take a crack at that.
I think there's got to be Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to leads, there's two elements, I think. There's more than two, but let's just say there's two for right now. There's lead quality and then there's lead volume.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the appropriate lead volume, it doesn't really matter how good your leads are because you have no consistency, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think that, I think there's definitely a relationship between the two, but I think that there's got to be alignment and buy-in at the top level of the organization to understand like what their objectives are, right? We have partners who, they strictly work like digital long form leads that are on their branded, owned, and operated websites.
Yeah.
Those are people who are logging in to a branded page and they're filling out their information and giving consent to be contacted. And that is a really, really high quality lead.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
There's some brand loyalty there. There's an expectation that they're going to have a good experience with that brand. And the experience that we need to provide that lead is very different, right? And obviously, like from my perspective, the yield there on the number of leads to sales opportunities is going to be much higher than, a lead that's sold to 5 different companies.
Yeah.
It might be like co-registered. It might be, it might be sold to a bunch of different companies in a bunch of different industries.
Yeah.
Right. That's a lot cheaper than generating your own long form lead, but the yield on it's going to be much lower too. Right. Yeah. So are you looking for high volume, lower quality? Are you looking for, lower volume, higher quality? You really need to understand where that sweet spot is. And maybe it's a mix of both, but you've got to understand what your sales organization is and what they're going to be good at.
Absolutely. What do you think, Carson?
Yeah, I think it also comes down to like what kind of goals or targets or quotas do you need to hit for your growth. It's going to determine, how hard you want to go with lead volumes and things like that. And it's also probably a function of, how contactable and convertible are those leads that you're getting. Like Jacob mentioned, it's like if you've got a high volume of low contact, low conversion data, well, you're going to need a lot of that in order to generate and hit your quotas and targets. So I think that kind of goes into some of the mix. Are you going to start small and scale with the high quality data that's branded and everything like that Jacob mentioned, or do you start with something that's like kind of somewhere in the middle?
But before you ever decide that, you need to have the processes, you need to have the systems in place that'll allow you to measure that on a day-to-day basis.
Or nothing, basically.
Yeah,
exactly. You're just chucking money into it.
You're constantly testing those assumptions.
Yeah.
And
KPIs.
Yeah,
all that. Make
exactly.
Sure
I mean, we do that with our partners. We report on our performance daily, and they report on their performance to us, right? And that allows both of us to calibrate and make sure that what we're doing is in line with their objectives and vice versa, right? And a true partnership, you're working together towards a common goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess the answer to the question then is get as much high quality good leads as you can and make it as consistent as you can so that it's scalable at the same time, right? So yeah, I think that answers that question to an extent. Maybe not as helpful of just saying, go get a bunch of really good leads, but the truth is in the end, you need to have good quality leads because they're going to convert on the back end. Otherwise, what I've noticed at least is when we have those kind of co-reg leads and we have leads that are more opt-in, you give all kinds of activity, tons of activity on the front end, but rarely does it turn into the activity on the back end that you need it to be.
And it is so much harder to deal with from an agent perspective or from like a front end perspective too, because those customers, their perception of your brand might not be as strong as or as positive if you're the third or fourth person that's called them or that's reached out to them or texted them, as it would be if they filled out a form and you called them and gave them a white glove customer experience.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of this first podcast. Before we finish though, what are some parting pieces of advice that you two would like to give to the consumer or really the person we're talking to out there when it comes to the sales funnel in general and this whole process? What do you think, Carson?
Advice on the sales funnel, I think that's such a broad question.
It's too broad.
It's like maybe tough to answer specifically, but I think the one thing I know that's been part of our success is getting the right people on our team and making sure that we've got the right people handling the right roles And that makes all the difference. You know, when you've got the right people tackling the problems, building your process, you're going through your, you know, your strategy and your reporting and your KPIs and your people management, all those things. It's just really critical to have the right people. So I think that's a great place to start for anybody that's like, do I have the right people involved? You know, I think that's
for sure. What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, I think be really clear on your vision. Like begin with the end in mind, right? If you can build things today that are going to make your life easier tomorrow, then take the time to do things the right way the first time, because that's going to make your life a lot easier, right? So you hear me talk about it. I've said it how many times, you know, systems and processes, like how do we track the right metrics today? It's a lot easier to track those metrics with 5 leads than it is to track it with 2,000 leads and 30 different sources, right? So when you start today and you start to build out your process, make sure that you have that end in mind and clear objectives and a clear vision that everyone's bought into. And if you've got the right people in place, that's when magic happens, right?
Yeah, I would have to concur with both of you. In the end, get the right people in the right place doing the right things, and that allows you to have these processes so that they're in place so that you can understand what's actually happening with your sales funnel. Once you have that figured out, then all of a sudden you can start dropping different lead types in there, identifying what's working for you, working with people like us to get more out of that over time. But if you don't have that sort of understanding of, I've got the right people, I got the right processes in place, that's where you have to start. And that's where the success is always at. Thanks for listening today. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. If you have any ideas for us, please leave something in the comment to let us know what we could talk about in the future. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.